Hello, this is Bill Aimone.
Hi, and this is Katy Wyrick. Thanks for joining today.
Absolutely. Today we're going to talk about exploration and production companies, or otherwise known as upstream companies, business software systems.
Yeah, there's a bunch out there, and we previously published a State of the ERP for more standard common industries, and that's out there and available. If you're interested, please send us an email. We'll get that sent to you. But today we're going to focus on these E&P systems specifically, the nuances, and really just talking through our experience with them.
Yes, and it's somewhat complex on the surface yet, but when we dive into this, hopefully we'll simplify, or as best we can, what the landscape looks like today. And we're going to share with you some frank and honest perspectives on what's happening in the industry from a software perspective. And really, when we talk about software, we're talking about the software that enables all the business processes within an E&P company. Mm-hmm. So that could include production revenue. It could include
the JIB, the land piece is a very big part, and which system should be integrated with the next. So if you have your drilling information management systems and economics, reservoir, how do those talk to each other, and what are we seeing in the industry today?
Yeah, and frankly, when you look outside exploration and production in the manufacturing world, there are ERP systems out there that span, and they can do everything for a manufacturing company pretty much. Or if you step into a services type company or financial services, there's a lot of enterprise software out there that services them. However, in the exploration and production industry, there really is no single one solution that does everything. And if you ever have a software company that says we can do everything for you, I would be skeptical. How about you, Katy?
Yeah, some of these companies do say they can do everything, and that's where we believe that they can do everything. But when you have this mass quantity of systems that one company provides, you're not getting the same level of support or functionality than more of the specialized systems that kind of just focus on one small piece of the business instead of trying to do everything all at once.
Yeah, and it's sort of like going to a restaurant. How many times have you been to a really good restaurant where they have like 500 items on the menu? Usually that's a good sign that it's a bunch of mediocre stuff that might have been frozen a couple minutes ago, right?
But then you have like the chef special where it's just the one thing that he's bringing out, and it's his the best dish, and that's what we're seeing works best for a lot of companies is when a company has just one product, and that's what their focus is, and our clients seem to like it because the support is great as well. They have the resources at the system providing company to support the client and really make sure that not just initially through implementation, but then long term you're able to have the support that you need.
So today we're going to help you leave with what are the best dishes to get out there from the different software solution providers out there in the exploration, production, oil and gas space. So really, if you think about an exploration and production company, they're really involved in two activities. One is on the exploration side is actually finding oil and gas and identifying it, and then taking that information and having drilling projects and then actually producing it, and then transporting it. So if you look at all those steps, they're completely different. And today we're not going to talk too much about we'll call it the front end geological and geophysical systems, otherwise known as the technical G&G systems. Frankly, there's really two major providers out there, Halliburton, Schlumberger, and there's usually if your geologist or geophysicist will tell you which one's better.
And they're going to have a preference regardless of which one you have. It'll be probably the opposite of what your engineer is wanting.
Right. So today we're going to really be talking about production systems, the field data capture, production surveillance, production accounting, revenue accounting, the regulatory reporting piece, and then also be talking about land management, land lease, contracts, GIS, and then joint interest billing, so when you have joint venture partnerships, and then getting into the authorization for expenditure or the capital type tracking products out there, fixed assets, asset management, accounts payable, general ledger, financial reporting, supply chain, and then a lot of the work order, invoice routing, data exchange, marketing, and drilling information management systems. So that's a lot.
That is a lot.
So we're going to get through this quickly, but here's the good news, though, folks. We actually have a write-up of this available on the Trinergy website at trinergy.com, and it's the 2019-2020 State of the E&P Systems, and you can email us at info@trendenergy.com to get a copy of that. But so today we're going to talk about those systems, and really we want to talk about is, so if you look at the E&P environment today, the companies out there, you have the majors, of course, and then you have with the majors, Exxon, Chevron, which they're involved in all aspects of energy, particularly oil and gas, and then you have the major independents, your Anadarkos, your Devon, Southwestern Energies, and then you have your, I'll say, smaller independents. And when we look at the solution providers that are out there, we tend to divide them up into two categories. One is Tier 1, and the other is Tier 2. So what we mean by Tier 1 are really systems that are geared towards either your majors or your major independents, or maybe even your larger private exploration and production companies where you're operating and drilling thousands of wells, and you might be operating in several different basins. So really we're talking about those domestic providers from a Tier 1 perspective. And then when we talk about Tier 2, we're talking about maybe the smaller players that may be operating in one or two basins, maybe have hundreds of wells or less, and maybe a few are joint venture partners, and they don't need that scalability, but they still need a system to be able to produce royalty checks and be able to manage their land agreements and production. So some of the Tier 1 players, Katy, maybe talk a couple about what some of those are and who are the kind of the major ones out there.
Sure. So SAP is, of course, our Tier 1 option. They are the biggest player in the game. On top of that, we have P2, Quorum, and Inertia as kind of our main Tier 1 systems that we're looking at. And within each of these Tier 1 companies, they have multiple applications that are available. So for SAP, we can start with the SAP, the S/4HANA.
Yeah. And so if you look at SAP's been around a long time. They are very strong in a lot of industries. But what they've years ago, they bought from Price Waterhouse, they bought a system called Premass, which then they turned into their IS oil product. And kind of the center of all of that is your production and revenue, or PRA, production and revenue accounting solution. So when you look at that, a lot of the, I'll call it the major oil and gas companies use SAP, and they use the SAP PRA or IS oil product. Now, because they have other requirements. They're international. They also have refineries, which is almost like manufacturing. They have logistics and supply networks in the midstream space. So an SAP solution's great for them because they're able to use those other capabilities. When you step outside of that and you're a domestic oil and gas producer, you're really looking at the SAP PRA module plus their core financials. So and just be aware when we use the word SAP PRA or IS Oil, it's actually a separate module from your core SAP financials. So typically what will happen in a company is I've got my SAP financials, which are my general ledger, my fixed assets, I'm doing the depreciation, financial reporting, but then I have my production revenue accounting module, the PRA module, sitting next to it. I'm just doing, I'm oversimplifying, but a simple journal entry to book your production and revenue entries. Understand that, and by the way, this is all in what SAP calls their S/4HANA platform, which is their state-of-the-art database platform, that how they operate, and it works extremely well, and it's very scalable. So they have no problem scaling up from that perspective. And
that's a great point, because what we're seeing is a lot of companies either divested and they have SAP still from a bigger company that they were a part of. So now it is too robust or too customized for their operations, and that's why it doesn't work. But then what we're also seeing is companies that go into SAP and decide we're growing, we're ready for SAP, this is the biggest, best system out there. It's kind of a blessing and a curse thing where it's so big, everything has to be customized. That's why it's so great, is because it's so robust, but that means there's a lot of configurations and a lot of setup is required initially, and then it has to be maintained through upgrades. So it's a great product, it's the biggest, the best, but it does require a lot of maintenance, and it's not necessarily the best application for everybody.
Yeah, and I would say largely if you look at SAP, the implementation of that and the support of that tends to be higher than their competitors from a cost perspective. Because think about it this way. If I buy a car, an automobile with a lot more functionality, and that does a lot more things, and something goes wrong, it's usually not one thing that goes wrong, several things go wrong. Or if I've got to rebuild or redo something or maintain something, it always costs more. I've got to take 5 more parts off to be able to fix that one or just change the oil. And so look at SAP that way. The second thing to be aware of with SAP is the PRA module. It's almost a platform. It is a very scalable platform for production and revenue accounting. However, a lot of organizations have to customize it because you get into these complex delivery networks and special rules and business rules around allocations, and a lot of companies have had to customize the PRA module to get it fit for them. So what's happened is SAP actually, there's several companies out there that actually will work alongside the SAP systems integrator and provide those customization services to make sure it works for the company. But those customization services tend to never go away, and you always need that support and that help. So with the fancy Lamborghini, you're going to spend a little bit extra, but you get a nice system but it's going to cost you something to get that in. But again, SAP is a great product. The company's going to be around a long time, and it's not going anywhere, and they can always find resources, which is nice from an SAP perspective. But you got to pay for it. So when E&P companies think about oil and gas prices, you got to be able to scale up and scale down, especially if you're scaling down and you're doing any type of divestitures at some point. Then you're left with, or even you're in a declining production environment, and at some point you realize I've got to recover those costs. You might find that SAP is not the right answer. Again, if you're an international company, great solution. Any other comments about SAP, Katy?
No, I think that you got it. So moving on next to P2. P2 Energy Solutions is the name of the company, and they have a lot of different products and applications that they provide. They've been around for a while. So since 2004, they have been kind of picking different applications up and making it their own. And what they do really well is when they pick up an application or they buy a system or a company, integrating it in with their existing suite of applications is something that you know that you're going to get. So all the applications, whether it's a land system, the ERP, the production data, the gathering, all of that will be able to talk to their other applications out of the box, which is great.
Yeah, so look at P2, though, almost as a suite of options, right? So P2 started out in the ERP space buying Excalibur. Excalibur's been around a long time, and then they brought in Oracle Energy's, and they call it Enterprise Upstream product. Then they purchased a nice package called Bolo. So really those are kind of the 3 core alternatives a company has when looking at P2. So earlier we talked about Tier 1, Tier 2. Well, P2's Enterprise Upstream, or EU we'll refer to as, that's kind of I'll call it their Tier 1 solution for larger independent oil and gas companies. Very scalable, nice solution for your core, I'll call it revenue, JIB, accounting needs. And then stepping down, you have P2 Bolo, which they acquired. That's a nice Tier 2 solution for smaller, I'll call it more nimble companies that may not have the complex delivery networks, may not have complexity with their joint venture agreements, and they might be operating in 1 or 2 basins. The third one, that P2 Excalibur, that's been around the longest. Unfortunately, a lot of companies have been moving off of that and moving to other competing platforms. Excalibur, they have not put a lot of effort into keeping Excalibur up to date, and our clients are basically telling us that it seems like old technology and they want to move off of it, and a lot of them are either migrating to P2 Enterprise Upstream or a Quorum or an SAP. Or
even one of their competitors.
Or Inertia from there. So if you're looking for a solution, if you're a Tier 2, I would take a look at P2's Bolo solution for sure. If you're looking for more, I'll call it higher horsepower, something compared to an SAP, definitely look at Enterprise Upstream. And Katy, maybe talk a little bit about the components of Enterprise Upstream, what that means and what that looks like.
Sure. So Enterprise Upstream is, as you mentioned, Bill, the E&P accounting aspect of an ERP system. So it doesn't have the core functionality of the GL, the AP, the AR reporting. That is bolted on to the EU application.
So they have to buy that from somebody else.
Exactly.
Then.
A lot of times it'll be Oracle. That's what we've seen. It's compatible with SAP. Just basically finding a core ERP that...
But it could be anything, though. It could be Microsoft. But you mentioned Oracle because they used to be part of Oracle Energy, right?
Exactly.
But it doesn't have to be.
It doesn't have to be. And it's funny there because right now what we're seeing is kind of a big struggle that our clients are having when it is an Oracle application that's integrated with EU is when there's an issue that's identified, you don't really know. They're so well integrated, you don't really know which system is causing the issue. So P2 sometimes will say, well, that's not us. That's an Oracle issue, and then Oracle will come back and say, well, no, that's a P2 issue. And it's really hard to kind of pinpoint where it is and how to fix it because you don't have one company supporting the whole application. You kind of have to do some investigating in order to kind of figure out, and also upgrades are a little bit more difficult because of that as well.
But again, that's not necessarily a bad thing because you look at P2's enterprise upstream, their revenue accounting, JIB accounting, their whole, I'll call it E&P accounting specific stuff. It's almost going back to the chef special. That's kind of the fantastic application, highly scalable. Our clients love it.
Right.
There are in that world. And so there's a trade-off where if I said, well, okay, I'm going to go to a single vendor solution, say SAP, but I'm going to lose that trade-off with SAP with PRA versus P2's enterprise upstream. P2's enterprise upstream, we tend to hear a lot more better reviews, more positive in terms of being able to have it come out of the box and do the regulatory reporting, do the distributions that need to be done, even if they're unique and different. P2's been able to handle them more so with less customization.
And they do keep it updated as well. So there's a lot of support around EU, especially you mentioned regulatory reporting. Those reports change constantly, quarterly, annually, and so they're constantly coming out with new patches for these reports or new releases to just support any of the bugs or fixes. They take the customer feedback and they incorporate that into different rounds of upgrades that they roll out over time. So it's constantly changing, but in a good way.
Yeah, and it's a fantastic platform. Again, I would not let the idea of, and you need a different common ERP system that has the GL and that type of thing, because frankly, the interface between your E&P core accounting stuff and your general accounting stuff is typically a journal entry, and it's not that big of a deal.
Right.
I think the issues that EU had in the past where they were joined at the hip with Oracle, that's where they had some of those issues. But now that it's companies they might have an SAP or a Microsoft or an IFS bolted on to P2, they're happy with that solution. Again, we talked about EU. We're not going to get too much into Bolo, but if you're a smaller E&P company, Bolo should be on your short list of companies that you're looking at. The nice thing about Bolo is it has, I'll call it, all of the accounting modules. It has it comes with general accounting. It comes with your fixed assets. It comes with a mini AFE. It comes with everything for a mid-sized company. So essentially, if you're a smaller E&P company, you need something that's going to provide you all that accounting stuff, your land, your revenue, all that stuff. It has that all in the Bolo solution, which is kind of nice.
Mm-hmm. And same with Excalibur. So Excalibur also has kind of that full suite of functionality, the both common ERP functionality as well as the E&P specific functions where you have the revenue and JIB and land. It is, again, just a Tier 2 solution, a little bit smaller, and does seem to be kind of on its way out. It's not as supported as we've seen a lot of the other applications in the P2 suite.
Yeah. I would not. I'm not sure I'd have that one on my short list, but I definitely have Bolo for the smaller ones. Mm-hmm. But let's also talk about a little more about what P2 offers too, which is they have a nice production application which fits nicely with P2 EU and can be integrated with that, or it can be standalone. But they also have their P2 land solution, which are two, I'll call it world class, and I'll call it enterprise class E&P solutions that can be used with any type of accounting system or any type of environment. And maybe let's talk about with the P2 Wyrick suite, right? Their production suite.
Right. So you mentioned both Wyrick, the production suite, and then the land suite. Both are I would say the biggest focus of P2 right now in terms of improving the application and rolling it out to companies. So in the Wyrick suite back in 2014, I believe it was, they acquired a company called Wyrick, and in that suite of applications you have ProCount, you have Even, and you have Carte. And just to break it down, ProCount is the actual production accounting aspect of the application itself. So it does all the production allocations, and Even is the field data capture tool, and then Carte provides more of the inside look into the allocations and allows users to kind of visualize the production data in different formats. So that's what's included in the suite. They're all very integrated. It's very intuitive, and the end users seem to like it a lot as well.
And there's companies that use the Wyrick suite that aren't even on the P2 accounting platform. So if you're, for example, you're looking at SAP, you're going to need a production, I'll call it someone to do your daily production surveillance type activities, and you're probably going to end up bolting on a Wyrick or something else along those lines, maybe a Peloton or something like that. And probably the same goes for P2 Land as well. And talk a little bit about P2 Land, Katy, in terms of where the originations of that and kind of how that fits in.
Yeah, so P2 Land is what they call it now, but a lot of people in the industry know it as Tobin. So Tobin is P2's original land application, and what they've done is they've taken that somewhat outdated back end of Tobin and recreated it using the same database, and now it's called P2 Land. So they've completely revamped it. It looks and feels very different, but it functions very similar.
So it's just as good. So if you liked Tobin back then, you're going to love P2
It's a bigger
Land.
and badder Tobin.
Okay.
Exactly. Yeah, and so we've seen a lot of people moving that direction into P2 Land, because not only does it have the lease data and contracts applications where they can do their monthly calendars or payments or receivables and managing their leases there, which is great, but it also has the division order functionality. They call it domain, and you can have your revenue and your JIB decks, your entitlement decks stored in P2 Land and integrated to any other system, your accounting system, whether it is P2 EU or one of the other P2 products or a different application. The integrations for P2 Land, it is, from what we've seen, has been impressive.
Good. Well, so let's move on from P2. And so we talked about SAP. We talked about P2. There's two other major players out there. The other one is Quorum, and Quorum was started back in 1998. And they started out as a gas marketing solution where they with tips, and then in the 2000s they actually developed they actually purchased the Quorum Land solution, but then they also have what's called their My Quorum Accounting, where they've done I'll call the production revenue accounting and the JIB and AFE type stuff, and then kind of pulled that into play. So they actually, out of all of the kind of top ones, they have a lot. They span a lot of functionality into well economics too. The Quorum solution does. From a market share perspective, they don't have quite the market share that a P2 or an SAP does. And if you look at a lot of Quorum's marketing materials, of course they're flying on the coattails of the TIP solution, which is in hundreds and hundreds of companies that are using the gas plant accounting solution that they have. But their Quorum their revenue solution is picking up market share, and they seem to be doing better out there.
And their My Quorum Accounting is similar to P2, how they have multiple ERP solutions. My Quorum Accounting is one of their solutions that they've had for a while, and it is bigger and more robust, and that's what I believe they're pushing to their clients right now. But in recent news, they just acquired OGSys, which is very known in the industry.
It's OGSYS, so it's capital O, capital G, SYS, for those people that don't know what.
Yes, yeah. OGIS is what people call it. OGSys. Well, it's now Quorum OGSys.
Okay.
And what what OGSys is and how we've seen it be used in the past is for smaller companies. So it has all-in-one, the APGL common ERP functionality plus the E&P specific functionality, revenue, JIBDEX. It's very simple. So it is for small companies. If you don't have too complex of allocations or operations, multiple basins, OGSys is a great product. I really like it. But what people are concerned with this acquisition is the level of support. So OGSys has always provided spectacular support. That's like their shining star. That's what they're most known for. And I think what their clients are most concerned about right now is possibly losing that because they're going with the big company of Quorum.
Yeah, and that's to be determined, right? Everybody always gets concerned. Somebody's buying them, and they get the same support and all that.
Right.
So that's kind of a TBD, and what happens and how Quorum handles that. That's left up to them and their strategy.
Mm-hmm.
But look at OGSys as maybe a competitor to Bolo. That is Quorum's Tier 2 solution. It is limited, just like Bolo. I mean, if you have multiple legal entities or any type of complex financial structure, you're probably not going to want to steer towards an OGSys, maybe something a little bigger. But if it's a simple single basin type operation, we've got a client that operates in one basin, and they love OGSys. It's
Mm-hmm.
very fit for purpose for them. It does everything they need from an accounting, land perspective.
It's simple and it's user friendly, and that's
Right.
what the users really like about it.
Yeah. And then again, we talked about TIPS a little while ago as their gas plant accounting solution, which is used by a lot of oil and gas companies and midstream companies. Quorum Land, of course, is one of their marquee solutions as well, which is also called QLS. And if you ask SAP to tell you what land solution they would partner with, usually Quorum is on their list of their recommended application for land.
And we have learned great things about the Quorum land system as well. It is very robust, similar to a lot of the Quorum applications. It is the big, bright system, but with that comes some cost. And so there may be a better fit-for-purpose system, just depending on the company and the size and your existing systems. I'm not too familiar with the integrations with Quorum Land, but if you have an existing P2 system, it may make the most sense to implement and look at other options before just jumping to the biggest, best, most well-known land system, which I would say is QLS in the industry.
Right. And so the other thing that's unique about Quorum, they also offer a business process outsourcing solution that where if, let's say, that you don't want to have your own accounting and land staff and you want to outsource that, Quorum will handle that as well as part of their solution. So which is kind of nice, and we'll see if they end up doing that with OGSys. That would be a nice package for the smaller E&P companies. Well, let's move on to the kind of fourth and final, I'll say last, kind of Tier 1 solution is Inertia. Inertia has been around since 1983, believe it or not. And
they're still pretty small. I mean, the company itself, they keep it small, but they have great people. I think they're pretty picky about who's going to be a part of the team, and so they haven't, in terms of their company, blown up. They've kept it to the one application, which is Inertia. They haven't gone out and acquired a bunch of different applications and tried to make it their own. They've built each of the applications themselves, and they are there to support it.
Yeah, and when we say small, what they've done is, really, if you look at their people, it's the team that's developing and supporting the application, not necessarily in a huge sales force or something like that, which is good. Frankly, if I'm an E&P company, I don't want a company with a bunch of salespeople. I want people supporting, developing, improving,
the system.
And they know it. They know their system quite well. And here, the nice thing that we've liked about Inertia is, every time they do something new for a client, or it's a new regulatory report or a new state, that's available for all their other clients. So the nice thing about Inertia is it's a integrated package. So it's got the common ERP, your AP, your
GL, your
fixed
reporting.
assets, and your revenue accounting, land. It's got some AFE capabilities and the like. I think the issue you get into, and again, this goes back to the restaurant analogy, Inertia has a lot of stuff, right, and they have the common ERP, but if you're a company that's got a robust supply chain network and you need some more advanced procurement capabilities, inertia, you're probably going to need to do something else besides that. Now, I'm going to say that with the caveat that pretty much happens with every solution, whether it's SAP or P2 or wherever you go. There's always some bolt-ons that people put on top. We'll talk about the bolt-ons towards the end, but the one thing to note about inertia is they don't come across as your slick salesman. They don't have pretty presentations and all that stuff, and I think some people are waiting for that and expecting that, and when they don't see it, they're kind of we had some
underwhelmed
or turned off maybe, and which is, I would not dismiss inertia because they don't have that slickness on the sales side. And what they do is they provide a lot of information about their applications and what they can do and a lot of detail up front, and so you really learn a lot about what they can and can't do. And the nice thing is they've been proven to be scalable for companies. And where I've heard people complain about inertia typically isn't really with the software per se. It has to more so with they just didn't get their business process right, or they didn't implement it fully, or do the right things. We've got some clients that use part of inertia for something, and they don't use it for something else. And you ask why, they just we never got around to implementing that.
The other thing with inertia is there are many ways to do one thing, and so that is great because it gives your users options on how they prefer to run the process or run the allocations, whatever it is. But once you define that process, to your point, Bill, it's very easy to use, and it can do what you want to do with it. It's just defining that and setting it up in the right way to fit your business.
Right, and sometimes but the problem with giving too many people too many choices, they don't make decisions, and they stare at it for too long, and consequently they don't use it the way it should be. So I caution it with, you got choices, but when you're going through implementation, pick one and go. You can waste a lot of time trying to figure out the different ways to do it. So there is flexibility, but with flexibility there comes a little bit of I'll call it danger, for lack of a better word. So they do have ability to do production, field data capture. I will just, the one thing we see out there with E&P companies, even though a product like Inertia or P2 or an SAP or whatever it might be, they might have that production accounting capabilities. A lot of, I'll call it the production folks, want to pick their own solution and pick something that's user-friendly. In a lot of cases, they might use a ProCount or a Avocet or something like that to be their production alongside Inertia, which works just fine. You can do your allocations in a separate and then roll it into Inertia, or you can do your allocations in Inertia, so you have that choice.
Exactly. And what I would say for both the field data capture and the land and contracts, Inertia's applications are, if you have very simple land processes, you're not going through a lot of acquisition, you don't have complex leases, or if you don't have complex production allocations, these are perfectly fine. If you already have Inertia, we would recommend going with these. But if you have complexity to your process, just take a look at that and make sure that as you're going through some sort of selection, you ask the questions of whether or not you may need something more complex and more specialized.
Yeah, so those are the Tier 1 solutions, and so we'll move in. We're going to talk briefly, not too long, about the Tier 2 solutions. We've talked about P2 Bolo, we talked about Excalibur, and then we talked about OGSys, but there's three others that are out there that operate as independent companies. One is Wolfpack, the other is Integra, and the other is Sureware. Just a couple comments, and I'll comment briefly on Wolfpack. Surprisingly, Wolfpack over the past few years have put some money into the product and done some upgrades and modernized it to a degree where they can offer a cloud-based solution, and they've become a little more competitive. So they're putting more attention. I was concerned a few years ago, but not as concerned, and recently talked to some clients who use it. They're happy with it, no issues. But it's kind of, I'll call it your end-to-end Tier 2 accounting and land solution for
very, very competitive to OGSys. Yeah. So very similar in functionality, as well as kind of the market size that would be best fitted for a Wolfpack application. And
then there's Integra and Sureware. Those are again Tier 2. Integra has that full suite, common ERP, GL, AP, revenue accounting, etc. Sureware, however, is just more of a revenue, JIB, with the core E&P accounting type solutions. So again, the Sureware piece, they market themselves as kind of a bolt-on to QuickBooks. So if you're that size company,
very simple.
Yeah.
Very, very simple, very small.
So here's where we talked about kind of the major players, but we'd be remiss in not talking about, and again, this goes back to the chef special analogy here, other niche solutions that are out there. And, there's a lot for production and AFE, drilling management, reserves and planning, and supply chain and marketing. And we'll talk briefly about a couple of those. But on the production side, there are a couple other alternatives out there that companies should look at, because a lot of companies just kind of take that best-in-breed approach when it comes to production, right, Katy?
Exactly, and I think that production is so specific to the company itself that not one system is going to fit every company, what their needs are. We've talked about the Merrick suite, and we've talked about Inertia a little bit, but there's also Avocet, and Avocet is a Schlumberger product, and so with that there of course comes a price tag. But Avocet is also a very proven application that does a great job, as well as Peloton's. So ProdView is out there, and they have, of course, the data capture, the analytics, allocations, and the surveillance. And they're a little bit smaller, I would say, than Avocet and some of the other competitors. But look at exactly what's right for your company.
Yeah, and particularly with Peloton, they've got strong production surveillance capabilities. I mean, you think about that. So if you're a company that has, let's say you're an operator in areas like basins in California, where you've got, it's almost like a manufacturing type process where you're really trying, or you've got a lot of compression that you've got to manage and that type of thing. They're a good solution.
The other thing with Peloton, though, is the other applications that they have within their suite and the integration there. So SiteView, WellView, and we'll talk about this in just a second.
That's
as
a
well.
good point. Yeah, right. They're integrated with WellView, which is a leader in drilling management software. So good point. And because you really want to look at managing your well life cycle, it's a good point. Yeah. And then a new one on the horizon is this Waterfield. Don't know too much about them, but they're out there. They seem to be getting some market attention.
Yeah, we're thinking that they're a spin-off of one of the bigger companies, and they have a couple applications, their production allocation application, as well as I believe they have an accounting and a land system as well. So keep an eye out for them. I think they're going to be on the upswing.
Yeah, and then there's the marketing application. So if your company does market your own oil and gas, there's solutions like EMK3, Endure, which is more of an energy trading risk management platform, and then Allegro, logistics and trading and operations. If you're marketing your own oil and gas, and you have some complex capabilities around managing your trading and that type of thing, these applications are excellent for that, and those are probably the top three major players out there. If you don't, then you're probably not even going to mess with
Excel is just fine.
Yeah.
A lot of companies are still using Excel for their marketing needs, especially with the simple, if you only have one or two contracts or one or two purchasers.
Yeah, exactly. The one that's most interesting lately is probably the supply chain piece, and a lot of major independents and even the majors are looking at better supply chain capabilities, because that's really, if you think about the life of a well and production decline curves, managing your supply chain, your costs, are becoming a high priority. And a lot of companies historically had Ariba, which years ago was bought by SAP. It's a separate module from SAP. Ariba is really good at the sourcing, vendor catalog capabilities, and probably the big player in the market. However, we've heard some mixed reviews around their complexities. Even though they're the largest user base and that type of thing, they are complex. They are expensive to run and operate, and a lot of companies have kind of stuck to the core capabilities of their ERP system to integrate vendor catalogs, integrate the sourcing analytics and that type of thing, and use other things. But Ariba's out there, again, expensive, nice robust solution, but it's part of the SAP company.
We also have, which is previously OilDex has a suite of applications that are kind of in the supply chain department. Oilvex recently rebranded or was acquired by Drillinfo, which have rebranded to Enverus. So
Enverus, Enverus.
Yeah, and they're doing a lot. They're probably one of the fastest growing companies in the industry right now from a technology standpoint. And Open Invoice and Open Ticket are very strong proven solutions that we've seen throughout the industry.
Right, so it's got the catalog capability, but here's the nice thing about Open Invoice and Open Ticket. One of the big issues that companies have is I've got oil wells all over the place. They need to be serviced. I've got service companies sending me invoices, and I get these piles of invoices, and I got to match them to work tickets and figure out who did the work and where and how. The whole Open Ticket solution basically provides that electronic capability all the way from creating the work ticket and paying the invoice and having a streamlined process, so that your service companies aren't chasing your company man down for every invoice, and you can basically tie it back to and have that information that gives you your supply chain metrics and performance information that you need. So it's a very nice solution for the industry, and frankly, go to any. Here's a nice thing about it. Just about every service company out there has a customer that uses Open Ticket or Open Invoice. So if you're an E&P company and you go to your customers and say, hey, we want you to implement this or integrate it, it's not a big deal because they already have it. So I definitely, solution should be on the list for every E&P company of reasonable size.
And it's very intuitive. I mean, the front end of Open Invoice and Open Ticket is very user friendly, and especially working with both the field guys and the back office. I mean, everybody has the opportunity to really get in there and understand it and enjoy it.
And they're specific to the oil and gas industry, frankly. I mean, so that's what's nice about it. They know the industry, they know the business, and implementation is not that expensive. It's nowhere near as expensive as putting in an Ariba or something like that. Third one that's showing up on the market is Smart GEP. They kind of have a manufacturing industrial background. They're very strong in kind of OCR technology, optical character recognition. I'll just make a comment about that. Given solutions like Open Ticket and Open Invoice, it makes OCR technology somewhat antiquated, even though it's a relatively new technology. OCR is, but I look at the market today and go, I'm not sure that's going to be something that changed my mind, but they've got strong sourcing, vendor catalog management capabilities out of the manufacturing world, very scalable, new to the oil and gas industry, but definitely someone that should be on your short list. That's Smart GEP. Let's move on to enterprise asset management. This is always interesting, right? If you think about a lot of the exploration and production companies that are operating in more mature environments where they have a significant number of assets that they're managing and owning that are, be it subsurface, all the way to your compression, to your I'll call it your any type of delivery mechanisms, all the way to your meters or any type of equipment that you have. Managing that equipment is becoming more and more important today.
Yeah, not only managing just the inventory of that equipment, and this isn't the fixed asset side of things. This is the physical equipment and the preventative maintenance there. So understanding what you have available, and then also understanding how you can get the most out of that asset. We're seeing right now Infor and IFS are the two leading providers that we've seen in the industry. And Infor first, we've seen a lot of capabilities around what they can do. It's pretty cool, the pricing structure that they have in place, and having the vendors so using Infor EAM as possibly a work order system on top of the asset management application itself.
Right. And the nice thing about a work order system within your enterprise asset management solution is being able to have better predictability and visibility into your costs. So, for example, I've got to go in and replace a compressor every 2 years, and it costs me a certain amount to do that. And I might need to replace some other equipment alongside that. I know what that costs and what that's going to be. So many times, an engineer will come in, or a pumper will come in to their supervisor and say, "Hey, we need to replace some pipe, an XYZ section, da 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 da," and they say it's going to be $3,000 to do it. Well, they get the job done, and it's $7,000. And they might say, well, wait a minute, why did we spend that money? What happened? How come these solutions?
Who approved this?
Right. Well, how did? Yeah. Well, these asset management solutions and work order solutions are very nice, and be able to put work orders together and look at history and be able to have some predictability. And then, and you mentioned the preventative maintenance side, and Infor is an excellent solution. This other one is IFS. Now, Infor and IFS are both, they provide ERP solutions around other stuff, but Infor has a lot of products, but their EAM solution is a nice standalone product for the oil and gas industry. IFS is kind of an interesting, I'll call it option for companies. They have a very strong asset management, enterprise asset management work order capabilities in oil and gas. In addition to that, they have a very nice core ERP system. So frankly, if you're sitting there going, well, I really like P2, but I don't like Oracle, or I don't want to have to spend as much on SAP, I want a nice, I'll say internationally oriented or fit for purpose ERP solution that has asset management capabilities like an SAP. Well, IFS is a great alternative, and I would definitely put them on your short list of ERP solutions for, or call it E&P solutions for your business.
Absolutely.
So let's talk about AFE. I mean, that's, Katy, maybe some thoughts around that.
I mean, we've seen very predominantly in the industry a lot of our clients moving to AFE Navigator. So some, depending again, if you're a very simple company, you may be able to manage all of the AFE processing manually, or some through some sort of in-house spreadsheets, exactly. But if you're looking for a more robust solution, AFE Navigator is great. They were recently acquired by Cerna, and they have the ability not only to collect the capital expenditure data, the approvals, the workflows, and get that AFE set up. They can also send out AFEs to partners, and then once the AFE is fully approved, it integrates really well with both, like a WellView, like a drilling information management system, and of course your ERP, to bring in actual costs. So you have your budget and you want to see how much have I spent to date. You should be able to see that in AFE Navigator in order to do a lot of the planning activities. It's very user friendly, but it's also very configurable to meet whatever need you have at your company.
Yeah, and I know we sound like we're selling AFE Navigator, but frankly, managing workflows, managing the budget, managing the estimate to complete, and having that, I'll call it, a seamless view all the way from the drilling prospect and request all the way through to the actual completion, approvals, expenditures, budgets, forecasts.
Accruals along the way. I mean, it's great for the accounting aspect too, to see what have I spent to date. So I have the ability to look monthly for my accrual process.
Yeah, and really there's not a competitor out there that's kind of a standalone. And the competitors are the AFE solution that comes with Quorum, the AFE solution that comes with SAP, so on and so forth. But if you look at our client base, those AFE solutions are more generic. They're not built for the oil and gas industry, where I've got partners involved. I've got different steps in the process. I've got to manage the well life cycle around that, and the accruals and that type of thing. And
not only that, but getting your operations, your managers, your field admin into your ERP to do approval on AFEs is not necessarily ideal. Those licenses are much more expensive than a license to AFE Navigator. So from a user perspective, it makes more sense to have your users going into a separate application for those activities.
Yeah, and the only other really what we see is DocView out there. They're more of a workflow solution for your, and they market it as an AFE solution, but more it's around workflow and approvals of documents and that type of thing that's used in more, I'll call it mid-sized, smaller E&P companies. So I don't want to dismiss them, as they're out there too as certainly a viable alternative for your smaller type companies that want to have traceability, approvals, and the like through your documents on particularly with AFEs. Right?
And not just for AFEs. I mean, you can do any sort of approval that you have within your organization, if that's journal entries or expense reports, anything like that. DocView is a good, solid solution as well.
That's right. And then drilling management, and we don't need to talk too much about this, but because we talked about this earlier. This is really managing your drilling progress, drilling costs on a daily level, and having that integrated, back to your work orders, having that integrated back to your core accounting system. But then, so there's really two main players out there. One's Wellview, and which we talked about earlier, owned by Peloton, and the other one is Open Wells, which owned by Halliburton. Both very good solutions out there. Really, your engineers are probably going to have an opinion about which one they like better, and certainly a Wellview is a great solution, particularly if you're using the Peloton's other production type systems. And the
integrations for both applications are very good. I will just warn, make sure that you set it up correctly from the beginning. It is simple and it's easy to set up. And so if you hand it to a user to get set up, you're setting the precedent for how everybody else is going to use it. So do it right up front, and then use that application as it's intended.
Yeah, we've seen a couple along those lines. It's a good point, Katy. We've seen some companies not really get a good view on what information they want to get out of it, and they just kind of rush into setting it up, and then they can't get the drilling reports that they want, and they're having to re-implement. So really have a good understanding up front on that. The last thing we're going to talk about, reserves and planning. Two major players out there, and we're really talking about your putting in your production plan, lease operating expense, forecasting that, and basically looking at your production decline curves and whether it's new acquisitions you're throwing in there, and doing your economic scenario analysis and looking at your reserves and how that kind of comes into play, and calculating that based upon forecast production, acquisitions, divestitures, and any type of activity you're doing out in the field. And really, you've got Aries, which seems to be adopted by a lot of the larger major independents, which is it's a Halliburton product, and then PhD Wind also is a competitor too, which is also out there. Katy, I don't know if you have any comments about those two, but
PhD Wind is a little smaller, both good products, and honestly similar to marketing. If you have very small or very simple reserves and planning processes, these are also applications or processes that can be maintained outside of any application if needed.
Yeah, and largely a lot of companies will end up putting a business intelligence tool on top of this that'll pull my Aries information in, maybe pull in my drilling information management in, also my financials together, and they're usually using something like a Power BI or a Spotfire or something like that, but those are, or a Tableau or something along those lines to actually do my analytics on top of all these type of systems, which that's a whole other conversation, is business intelligence.
We'll have to write that one next.
Yeah, we'll work on that one next. But again, this was a lot of information. We have this summarized in our 2019-2020 State of the Exploration and Production Accounting Systems handbook, which can be found if you go to Trinergy.com and then go to the bottom and go to handbooks. You can get your free version of that. And if you have any questions in the meantime, don't hesitate to email us, Katy or myself, at info@Trinergy.com, and glad to answer any type of questions. Please rate our podcast and let us know what you think. Thank you, and we appreciate you listening.
Thank you.